Welcome to the Driving Standard Podcast with your hosts, Matt Bono.
Officer, do you mind if I get out of the car while I'm pulled over here? And I just need to show you something in my trunk. And
Mike Smith.
What's in your package?
And Bryan Baca.
Pushing it in, and he's pushing it in, and then all of a sudden it stops, and he's pushing it in, and he's pushing it in.
Welcome to the Driving Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Smith. I'm here today with my co-hosts, Matt Bono and Bryan Baca, as usual. Today we're going to be discussing car mods and how unnecessary car mods are these days with the models that are on the road and with how difficult they are given the way manufacturers work their automobiles. All right, so how was your week, Matt?
yeah, it was pretty good. How about yours? You kind of did some traveling this weekend.
A little bit, yeah. I went jet setting this weekend. I went to Seattle for PAX West. And while I was there, of course, they've got a bunch of virtual reality stuff. I did not get to have the greatest experience with virtual reality ride, and I was a little bummed. Yeah. So they had a setup there for Aorus, which is a computer hardware company. And they were basically trying to show off their specs. So they had an Oculus hooked up with Project Cars 2. And they had a really cool looking rig there with pneumatic pistons that simulate the ride. And, well, here's what I discovered, okay? If you've got this thing set up in your home and you have it tuned properly, I think it's a lot of fun. My problem with it was that it was very clearly dependent on who was sitting in it. Like, I had to get in and adjust the seat. I was the only person there over, 6 foot. Everybody's there, kids, or they're, 5'10", whatever. There's not many of us that are real tall. So immediately I sit down, I got to push it back. They had a skanky headset for you to put on that every nerd from here to Topeka, Kansas has been wearing on his sweaty head for 3 hours. And immediately the first thing I noticed when I was watching guys as I was coming up in line, I'm watching them and their heads are all off to the right. Well, that's an indication to me from doing virtual reality stuff, it's not getting calibrated correctly, right? So you got all these people coming in and sitting down. You're not calibrating that chair every time somebody comes in and sits down when you're the 200th guest of the day. They're not calibrating the headsets. That's exactly right. Brian, I wish you guys could see Brian. He's like looking out the right window as he's trying. Yeah, that's exactly what it looked like. So that threw me off right away. And it was terrible. It didn't feel at all. What I learned from it is that if the virtual reality experience is tight and everything's calibrated well and set up well ahead of time, I think it could be a really good experience. It's a terrible experience if it's not done correctly. And this one was not done correctly. The force feedback was off. And you're already looking at kind of a pixelated version of what you would be looking at on a screen. So if you guys are used to these hyper awesome graphics that are in Forza or Project Cars, if you're looking on the screen, or Gran Turismo, any of them, that is not what you see in virtual reality. You see kind of a grainy version of that. Now, it's good enough, and it's certainly good enough to be immersive if all the other components come together. But if they don't, it was a pretty disappointing experience for me. Also, it was a huge deal. They did not have headphones.
Oh.
Which was...
yeah, that's rough.
pretty appalling to me. It's
yeah,
like, well, wait a minute. That's what makes it immersive is
Right.
hearing the cars coming up on your right, hearing cars come up on your left, hearing the revs.
What did they have? Was it just an open
Speakers
speaker
blasting at you.
in front of you?
But it's in a convention center.
Yeah.
It's a loud convention center. You got people screaming over the mics or over the loudspeakers for, the Final Fantasy 14 demo right next to you, or whatever other games are being demoed. So it was fun, but it was disappointing.
How was the chair? Because I've gotten sick on VR,
So
where you're driving and you go to brake, and in your brain you're not braking
Yes.
because
Yeah.
you don't feel it.
Yeah.
I've gotten super
and
sick off VR.
I've had
from
that experience in VR before. I've had that experience without VR. I had that experience playing Doom on a Nintendo.
Wow.
PS4. I was playing on PS4 and I about got sick playing Doom. So I could see you getting sick on this thing, because this is, kind of the point, is the experience can be totally immersive and fantastic if everything's right. And if anything's wrong, it goes from immersive to like puke inducing in one in one swoop. So,
And then you have to share the headset with somebody else.
Oh, yummy.
yeah, man, it was, I don't want to think about it.
Nice.
We were talking about it on the line on the way up. I was there with a couple of my buddies, and my son was with me. We were in line. And, we started looking at each other like, they're not spraying that thing down.
They're not wiping it
They
didn't wipe it off.
And you've got every kind of, you got every kind of animal that arrives at these things. So it wasn't, that wasn't the only car experience I had. I got to rent a hot, sexy base model Toyota Corolla. I hope this isn't what Toyota Corollas feel like all the time. No matter what I did trying to set myself up in that seat, granted, I was only driving 20 miles from SeaTac Airport to downtown Seattle. I was in that car for maybe 20 minutes, and it felt like a lifetime. It hurt so bad. I don't know what was wrong with that seat, and I'm hoping it's not just a Toyota Corolla thing. Because, spoiler alert, I try not to rent Toyota Corollas when I go on the road, but yeah.
Let's be honest. They realized you were Mike Smith from the Driving Standard.
Exactly. They're like, not only that, but your face is pinned up on this wall behind us saying, "Do not rent to this man. You're famous and wanted."
Yeah, we'll need a $6,000 deposit from you if you want to
They
rent
tried
this
to give me a Vespa, and I was like, well, I do have bags, guys.
tandem bicycle.
But yeah, I would have fit right in Seattle, let me tell you. It was an awful ride. And no matter what I did trying to jack the seat up and down, it still was just as awful. I couldn't. So it only had 5,000 miles on it, so I can't imagine it was that abused.
Yeah, beat up.
Back to something we talked about previously about like how cheap power is now. Like that thing could move.
Really?
I was like, yeah, a little, piece of junk.
Said no one ever about a Toyota Corolla.
Right? That's exactly what I thought. I was like, this is surprisingly powerful.
Wow.
Because it was at sea level.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So used to driving in Colorado. Oh, right. Thing number 475. It sucks about driving in Colorado.
That's
car
right.
Can't get any air.
If you haven't listened to the last episode, Mike went on a rant, and actually he still is going. He just stopped before this show, and this was a week ago.
Yeah,
that
people
we
were
recorded.
confusing me with homeless people in downtown Seattle.
You're
I was
still
just ranting on the streets.
Like, is that guy
"It
talking
hails,
about?
and it rains and it snows.
You're like, see, why is he talking about Colorado?
Yeah.
Interesting. Brian, how was your week?
Week was good. Worked on the Audi a little bit more. Put some gloss mirror caps on. Dug into the Talon. Got into some of the stupid 90s emissions. Ripped all that out. Got my hand in some weird spots in the engine compartment that didn't know I could bend that way.
Did you pull out? Did you pull out a lot of weight? Like, was this heavy stuff or not so much?
No, it was all like little rubber hoses.
Okay.
And
Yeah. So nothing.
all kinds of crap. Yeah.
I got you.
So,
And so the Audi mirrors now they match the grill,
yes.
right?
They
Blacked
match the
out
grill.
because the grill is blacked out gloss,
Yes.
not like a plastic dip
Nope.
textured.
No
We need
plastic.
to get some pictures of that car.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
We
It
should
does-
go do
it
a
does
photo
look
shoot.
good. Yeah, it does
Sweet.
look good. We can have you lay over the hood like a...
Yeah, you got to take your shirt off,
yeah, no.
like George Costanza. He'll just lay out on the.
yeah. You got to do Costanza on the hood.
Yeah, he'll just
that'd be
lay
so
out.
Sweet. Well, his
Perfect.
show would be in every home or would be arrested. One of the
Yeah.
other.
Probably the
Something-
second one.
Yeah, the second one will go.
Do you know who I am? I'm Mike Smith from the Driving Standard.
Yeah, we know.
I'm like, yeah, cool, nice
We
story.
won't rent you a car.
Cute Corolla. Asshole.
But it was good. How about yours?
It was good. Decided to finally take the top off the Jeep. I see like 45 minutes of sunlight, and I decided that I'd employ 4 people to help me take it off, and we got it off. And I forget because there's only 9 days, like Mike's rant on this last episode was.
Yeah.
There's only 9 days that you can actually drive with a convertible in Colorado, and so it's been a while, and I took the top off and got up to highway speed and was immediately sandblasted by all the dirt that was in the carpet. And it was like it was like a whirlwind of if somebody just like turned a vacuum cleaner on reverse and started just shooting all the dirt out of it into my face. So that was a lot of fun. And, spent another 25 minutes putting the soft top on, which is a whole, series of straps and everything. It's just a bikini top, just covers the driver and passenger. And, then it flaps like crazy at any speed over 30. So you're just like, thump, 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 thump as you drive, which is not annoying at all.
It's like putting up a tent to go drive.
And so I enjoyed getting sunburned and windblown and sand in my eyeballs and can't hear anything. And then it rained on the ride home, and it was 55 degrees.
I won't say it sounds like fun, but it does sound like...
I don't know if that's the word.
Sounds interesting, nonetheless.
I will say it is a blast having doors off.
Yeah.
Roof?
Sure.
I don't know if it's a blast having the roof off. That's kind of where you become really susceptible to the elements.
The Jeep, finally... I'm not blaming anybody, but she's blonde. And she left the sunroof open, and it rained. And we got out there and sat down. What was amazing was that the seats weren't wet, so we didn't notice right away. But then the cup holders were,
Oh,
full
no.
over.
Oh, man.
So this was a while. This was like overnight or what?
No. We left it out there yesterday afternoon, but we got a pretty good rain. Survived it just fine. So
Yeah.
apparently a Fiat 500 can handle a little rain inside of it.
Speaking of, and I think this is a great segue into our new segments we're introducing, is Fiat 500 is on the chopping block. It's not going to be sold in the United States anymore. They just announced this week.
Really?
And
is it because it's one of the ugliest, most hideous, most useless vehicles in the history of mankind?
Is it because Americans don't like small cars, as you just said with the Toyota Corolla?
I'm going to tell car manufacturers a little secret. Okay? People in the city don't drive cars.
They
People that
Uber.
aren't in the cities drive cool cars, or at least cars that are big enough to carry something or fast enough to carry you quickly somewhere.
Right.
All of these economy, hyper inexpensive vehicles that they're trying to push on the American buyer do not work for a pile of reasons.
But so while we are losing the Fiat 500, we have gained an electric Porsche.
Yeah.
That was just announced, a four-door. It looks like it's going to be taking on Tesla, relatively taking on Tesla. The problem is it's coming in at like $155,000.
Yeah.
So significantly more expensive than a Tesla. Here's an interesting twist is how they named it. And so it is the Porsche Taycan. But here's the thing. They have two different models. And the premium is a Turbo S, but is an EV, all EV. There's no combustion engine.
Weird.
So they're calling an electric car turbo, under their nameplate, which they're known for 911 Turbo S and stuff like that. But this is not a combustion engine, so it's an electric vehicle called a turbo.
It says the Taycan Turbo will make 671 horsepower and 627 foot-pounds. But the Turbo S will make 751 horsepower and 774 foot-pounds of torque.
Do they show their 0 to 60? Because I saw it earlier. It was like
It's gotta be
2.3.
Yeah, it's like 2.3 seconds.
It's
or something.
insane.
Oh. Did they make it to where it makes a noise?
There was something interesting I heard about that. They did say that there's something in the speakers that they programmed into the
Of course.
car that makes it sound like engine noise or some kind of noise
Sweet.
inside the car. I was
I
like,
kind of like that. Honestly.
that's interesting.
So
know?
There's a little bit of feedback.
here's the next mod for this vehicle, right? And since we're on a mod episode, somebody's going to put a speaker on the outside.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a pretty cool looking car, man. I kind of like that. I kind of like that Taken. Whatever they're going to call it. Tekken? Is it Taken 2?
A couple other things for the C8 guys. Everyone's been waiting for this mid-engine Corvette. For Jeep guys, everybody has been waiting for a diesel Wrangler. And for 2020, we are finally going to get one. They're putting a diesel V6 in the Jeep Wrangler.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Which is actually going to do, I think, really well in the global market because diesel is available everywhere.
Right.
Every country.
Right.
You can get diesel from Africa to India to Asia.
Right.
I mean, you
If
can
it's a
drive this thing
capable
across the
vehicle.
world on diesel. And so you're talking about a four-wheel drive vehicle, four-door, big Rubicon, and you can literally take that thing in every country now.
On to what this episode's actually about.
Nah. This was kind of fun.
No. Okay. All right.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I don't care.
Yeah, so mods. Bryan, you've been modding stuff lately. What are you focusing on next? Big thing?
I'd really like to do wheel spacers and lowering springs, but I don't know. There's exhaust. I look at lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Got exhaust super outrageously priced for an Audi.
I never understood that, man. I got a Sawzall. We can just cut that muffler off.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
cut it off.
Yeah. It's just tubing.
I would ask you, but you drive everything you drive is just massive and
Everything. Yeah. The mods that I do on my vehicles is like, I got
rack?
a new rack on my truck, baby. You know what's funny is you were saying that it took you 4 guys to take your your top off of your truck. It takes 3 of us to get that 600-pound rack into
I
the back of
believe
that
it.
truck. But I've got a system for it, so what I was supposed to do, folks, here when we're talking about modding, okay? This is no secret to you guys if you've listened before. I own a service business. And so I decided to buy a pretty nice F-250 last year for myself to drive. But it was going to be like my daily driver for the most part, and I wanted to be able to take it if we went up in the mountains.
Right.
So I wanted the rack to be removable and quickly removable. So the original idea was I'd tie it down with turnbuckles, attach the little hooks in the back, and that's worked out really well. And then the idea was I was going to have like a gantry to pull it up to the ceiling or something, right? That hasn't happened. I haven't gotten around to it yet. So now what we do is we've got this big rolling glass table. And every time we need to take that thing off, we unbolt it, shove it off the back onto the rolling glass table, and roll it into the corner. But it works great. I mean,
absolutely.
It's worked out fantastically. But
what's nice about that is then you have a mobile stand that you can literally just move it out of the shop if you need to.
Yes.
So there's like really from the practical standpoint, because the Jeep top's the same. There's a lot of guys that have these cool systems that they've built and they've uploaded their plans online, and they're like, all you need is 45 hours and a welder. And I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I'll get to that in 2022.
Yeah. You've got the welder. Now time to find this 45 hours.
Right.
Because that's not happening.
And so ideally you would build a top table or a top cart that exactly what you talk about. That is the best way. The problem with that is then you need the space, which here at your shop's not a problem.
Yeah.
But in a garage, when you have a couple...
I'm trying to save some floor space. The other crazy idea we had was to put it on rollers, to put rollers on the bottoms of the rack, and then have like a riser that's like big steel risers that would be at the height of the rack, so you could literally back the truck up onto it, and it would push the rack up and then hold it in place. But it's kind of short sighted. So that's as much modding as I do as my trucks. I never really did get into any of that stuff. Part of it was money. Part of, I had
you had kids early.
Married with kids at 19. There was no time for playing with the cars. So I'm more likely now, like, it's really funny. We've talked about me buying this car, right? Ad nauseum at this point. It's disgusting. But
what car did you like?
I like a Civic Type R.
That's different.
But I was looking at, it's already, like, I haven't even bought it. And I'm already like,
really?
I can do some stuff with it to, for looks and for, to make it stand out a little bit, And then I started looking at used stuff. And
that's a rabbit hole, man.
Nice, dude. There's a nice WRX in Denver right now. Just,
what year? Like ish?
It's a 14.
Okay.
And it has got all the bells and whistles.
That means it was ran. You better check that thing out.
So he swears up and down that it was never track raced. But
it doesn't have to be track raced.
It was a mechanic that owned it first, a Subaru mechanic.
It's weird that he opened the conversation that way, though. Like, hey, I like your Subaru.
Is like, yo, I never raced this thing much.
This is the third engine that's in it.
Yeah.
I haven't raced this engine yet.
Yeah. So I'm afraid I'd go drive something like that and be like, yeah.
Oh, of course.
I'd have to have it. So I was looking at Challengers because I thought, maybe I'll just get douchey. But
I love them, though.
I love them. But the thing is, like, you can get a Challenger cheap, but it's going to be a cheap Challenger. The Challenger I want is, $57,000.
Right.
You can get C8.
Is that the Hellcat?
Yeah.
50s? That's 60?
These are like used.
Hellcats?
Yeah, most of them. Like, you can find a used Hellcat now for like under 50. But but that thing's been ridden hard and put away wet. Let's be honest.
Of course, yeah. That's why it's for sale.
Yeah, that thing's been ridden like your mom. It's going to be rough.
Well done.
So what are you going to do now, Matt? You gonna put 20s on the Jeep and then ground effects?
I'm in an interesting position. So I have this second owner 1955 two-door Chevrolet just sitting there in the garage, complete, but needs full restoration. So now it's resto mod. It's part restoration, it's part modification. I want to do a new LS motor. I want to do an automatic transmission, a better diff, but I also don't want it to be kind of these jelly bean hot rods that we talked about on the last show. So now I'm starting on how to get the paint off. And, I've done this before, and you have a few different options.
So what do you want to do with it? Like, if we decide to turn this into, because I agree with you. Like, it's so, I respect the full restoration back to the original.
Yeah.
Really cool. I'm not a big fan of the Jelly Bean hot rods, and it's partially because I grew up going to those shows every weekend. You know, you go to Good Guys, and you go to, you know, you go to any rod run anywhere, and it's always like, oh, cool, your insert, car model here has air conditioning, and
For
a
me,
nice
it's
stereo
like
system. Like, what's that?
looking at a car from 1940s and not knowing if it's a kit car or not. That was kind of annoying.
Yeah.
These guys would just, like we talked about, paint the grill, paint the bumper. Everything's this aftermarket color that would never have came on the car. And you're looking at it and you're like, I'm actually not sure that's not fiberglass.
Do we get wild with it?
No, I've thought about kind of going wild with it. And, naturally my first thought is let's race it, right? Let's put on a drag strip. Let's put it on salt flats. And I know enough about racing that you cannot have a nice race car. There's no such thing as a nice race car.
Right. And that thing's also going to weigh 11 billion pounds.
No, actually it weighs less than the Talon.
Really?
100%.
Yeah.
It's all steel, isn't it?
Yeah, but they just didn't weigh that much, man. I mean, there's not a lot to it.
Wow.
There's not a lot of electronics and safety and airbags and automated this and electronic that. It is just old school tech. So, yeah,
Right to the rust.
for me, it's doing the body right and probably leaving the body pretty stock. I like that look. But then airbags, I'm going to drop it on some airbags. Motor swap, tranny swap, diff swap. And then my goal is to drive this East Coast to West Coast.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. And to do that, you need to have reliability, which I'm not known for. Keep my foot out of it. But yeah, daily driver. I think that'd be an awesome daily driver.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
Yeah.
But you're not thinking, you don't want to turn into a Jelly Bean hot rod, but you don't want it to be a direct resto. So
I don't want factory. Factory looks great, but it's way underpowered. It's a straight six, biggest straight six you'll ever see, but still a straight six. So need to get rid of that. 3-speed, 3 on the tree. Yeah, I've driven those before, and they're fun, but not fun for like more than 25 minutes.
Right.
So
Gets old at a certain point.
it does.
This project's going to take years.
I have it factored for about 24 months. I've started going through it.
24 months if you start to work on it.
If I start to work on it and, have weekends, which I don't normally have.
That's not going to happen.
So, yeah, the modification game is kind of changing. If you said that there was a minivan with 20-inch wheels, a sound system, 2 TVs, what would I be describing 10 years ago? If you say car show. Right? Because that was the only time, or 15 years ago, that was the only time that you would see that level of parts.
Yep.
Low profiles, 20s, and all this stuff. And now that's the average minivan on the road right now. Think about the Challenger. You go and you buy that car. Thing already sounds great. It's already got an exhaust system on it. The stereo, it already has, a Bose or whatever, the Harman Kardon or whatever, the high-end premium sound. Yeah, some sort of premium sound system. It's a paddle shift, so you're not going to go and put a short throw shifter in it.
Right.
It has all the gauges. You can go through the Dodges and you can get a 0 to 60 time. You can see what your G's are. You can, so you don't need a tack. You don't need all these aftermarket gauges or anything like that.
Right.
It's kind of just turnkey, ready to put your foot down.
Yeah, ready to rock. The resale value on it is not going to go up.
No.
It's going to go down.
Right.
Because people are going to look at it and go, did you race it? Well, did you know what you were doing?
That's the big one.
And I'll speak from experience. We bought my son an 06 Mercury Cougar, and it looked nice. It looked really nice. But I knew as soon as I pulled out to look at it why this guy was trying to get rid of it. Is because, well, yeah, dude, you put some random rims on here that I don't even think they fit the car.
Right.
You've got, he's showing me all this stuff. Like, well, it's got this special stereo in there. And the stereo is like, it's going to stereo shops now, like they don't chop your stereo out and put in this crazy looking aftermarket thing with lights around it and stuff, right? So it's like, okay, well, that was 10 years ago when you did that. And I don't know if you knew what you were doing, because every guy that replaces a radio in a car, it plays a melodic tune of the revs for us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, you both have had like really bad stereo install.
No, that wasn't from a stereo install. That was from a backup camera system replacement, because my bumper got hit after the Super Bowl. Some drunk rear-ended me. drove away as fast as he could before the cops could get there. So the shop took it in to replace the rear bumper. We got the car back. Stereo doesn't work.
Yeah, because they grounded it out.
Because they blew it up. And they're like, well, we didn't weld on it or anything. I'm like, dude, you didn't have to weld on it. All you had to do was not know how you were hooking the connections back up while you still had the battery in. And that's what they did. The battery was still connected. They tried to, pop some wires together for that rear backup sensor. And I lost my amplifier, which is expensive as hell on these things. So.
And then, Brian, you had a CD player issue, right? And then somebody helping you just jam the CD player back?
Yeah, that was in my Honda Civic, my show car. Just got some new TVs installed, all this stuff, and he's pushing the deck back in. He's pushing it in, and he's pushing it in, and then all of a sudden it stops, and he's pushing it in, and he's pushing it in, and he's pushing it in, and then all of a sudden all the smoke. Smoke. Just that was a good one.
Sorry.
But, yeah, so he pushes it in, and all of a sudden smoke starts pouring out of all the vents of the dash and all this stuff. I got lights coming on in the dash, all this stuff. I still have an SRS light that's on the dash. It
just fried
it fried something. I haven't tearing it apart.
Yeah, but again, now, every car you get, God, if it doesn't come with a state-of-the-art sound system, it's like, what kind of ghetto car did you buy,
Yeah.
So
I drove a Corvette from the 70s I was going to test drive and buy. And it was the worst install of anything I'd ever seen. Every part on there was not lined up, wasn't out the right part.
For a stereo?
And it just in general, like everything. So he had this aftermarket cowl hood so he could fit the carburetor, and that he had a spacer on that shouldn't have had a spacer on it because now the hood couldn't close correctly. And the hood had vents cut into it to let heat out because it's more for a drag car. And his solution was to take the air filters off, to close the hood, and to run with no air filter, but to put a motorcycle helmet visor over the carburetors so water wouldn't come through the vents and get into the carburetor.
Wow.
And that's when I immediately said, oh, man, I really don't like red interior. I didn't know it had red. Okay, all right. I think I'll keep looking. Thanks, man. Terrible.
Yeah, there's nothing worse. Well, and that's what's funny now, too, is like you used to see modded cars on the street, and of course the rice burners were the stereotypical ones where you see them rolling around town with flare fenders and tiny micro tires on them, and they'd have ground effects or whatever. A big, huge, massive spoiler that looks like it comes off of a freaking sprint car.
You just offended Brian so much.
Yeah, no, I know. No. What I'm saying is, like, now when you see that stuff, your initial thought is not like, oh, that's cool. Your initial thought is like, what did you do to that thing? Because the thought is that you're damaging it. I think that's how people look at it.
Back in the day, I remember a lot of body kits going unpainted. People would just put them on because they could afford the $600 for the kit, and they drive around with it in that yellow gel coat look. But now when I see one done, like tastefully done, I love it. I think it's cool.
I do too.
Yeah,
I see them and I'm like,
how
oh,
often
man.
do you see them?
Zero.
Yeah.
Brian's it.
I
Brian's
drive
the
around
last.
all day too, so I see lots of them.
Do you see like really clean, like old cars though? Like it's not old, but like 90s street cars.
No, I don't see a lot of those anymore.
And every time you see a 90s hatchback Civic, there's no rear bumper.
And to that point also, and this is something that I think is, I don't know why it's happened, but like every modded Subi that you see now, they're all the same.
Yeah.
They're all the same. They've got all the same mods on them. Yeah. Everybody's running the cop. Everybody's running the same front ground effects. Can't think of the name.
Splitter or whatever.
Yeah,
front lip.
Yeah. And then everybody's got the same spoiler on the back end.
Right.
Aftermarket spoiler.
And all the same exhaust.
Yeah. So it's like, well, and those aren't factory. Those are people going out and buying aftermarket parts, and they still look like the guy next to them. It's become a plug and play for these 5 different mods that you're going to get on a car.
It's changed. Back in the day, okay, so a chip, let's say a chip's $1,800, $2,000. Now, to most people, I'd say, that sounds like a lot of money. You're like, man, $2,000. But it gains you, 140 horse?
It's not even that much. That was just on that RS3 we were looking at.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, not even that long ago, 13 years ago, you would spend $2,000 and you'd get 35 horse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And now, and you would be doing an install for 10 hours.
Yeah.
Exhaust, headers, intake, pour and polish throttle body. And there you go. There's $2,000 right there.
Yeah.
There's 10 hours of labor and there's 35 horsepower. You get in the thing, you're like, oh, 35 horsepower, this is great. I increased power by 20%.
Right.
And now you, like, 15 minutes, plug something in or take it to a shop, they flash the ECM, and all of a sudden your turbo spools faster and dumps more pressure, and you can access, even if it's double that power, even if it's 70 horsepower for that price, that's still so much better value than what it was back in the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's nice now because a lot of these places you don't have to take the car to them anymore.
Yeah.
You have to pay a little bit more money, but you get, they send you the little adapter that goes into the car. Then you plug it into your computer. They ask you, what do you have on your car? Oh, I've got intake, exhaust, front mount intercooler, all this stuff. And then they go in and they program it and they say, all right, here's your tune. You plug it into the car. Boom. It just tuned your car.
Rock and roll.
And then if you need to take it to the factory or, if it's under warranty and you're not supposed to have a tune on it,
You just reset it.
you just put the stock one back on, unplug it, and good to go. And it's all done sitting in your garage.
And I think it's safer now too. Like I remember watching a street racing documentary back in like the early 2000s, and these poor dudes were just blasting parts all the time because it was so hard, it was so complicated, and now it's almost become like commonplace. Like, no, you're gonna chip that? Okay. Now you're still voiding all the warranties and everything, and risking damage to internal components and everything, but. It used to be I feel like it used to be you were taking a 60-40 chance, and the 60 was that you were going to pop something. And now it's probably you're probably okay 80% of the time.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention and keeping things relatively simple, you can do quite a bit with that. Because when you see guys street racing now, right? You see guys street racing, and it was always, every car you looked at was like, God, that dude spends his entire weekend body modifications, and he's dropping it, he's messing with the suspension and the wheels and the tires and everything. Now when you see guys street racing, they look like stock cars coming off the floor models. And they've just got chips, and they're, whipping up and down the roads around here.
Right.
And it's like, well, that doesn't look like anything, it doesn't look like anything different from the other car that passed me 2 minutes ago, but it's going another 30 miles an hour.
There was always that quote kind of growing up, at least in my culture, where it was, built, not bought. And now that's flipped. It's bought, not built.
Yeah, I bought it.
And really, I'm not knocking on that. Like, that used to be kind of a derogatory term back in the day. But, I mean, how can you blame somebody? They can literally go buy, a Hellcat Demon, which we mention a lot on this show, but $70,000-$80,000, and you have a drag strip car that has slicks.
Yeah,
like,
so
are you
stupid.
kidding me? There is
who doesn't want that?
Like drag racing a car and building a proper drag car and getting the tires and the suspension tuned. Like, you have Dodge engineers behind you.
Letting them do it.
And it's all under warranty.
And it's all under warranty.
So when you blast it, it's
exactly.
hey.
And this is what, what does break my heart about this more than anything is that this is what's killing speed shops.
That's the thing. Like, those things are going away.
Well, because you can get 20s on a car from the factory. What size are your Audi wheels?
They're 18.
Okay, that's the size they used to put on, aftermarket size.
Yep.
Right.
Because 20s were for gangsters and 18s were, nice, big, but not gaudy.
Yeah.
And now that's what your car comes with. Why the hell would you spend $3,000 replacing that?
Yep.
They look good.
Now, people still do it. Don't get me wrong.
But this is not limited to speed, right? I mean, now you can go get a Raptor, long travel suspension.
Right. Oh, my brother's got he's got the Chevy. Oh, I need to look up what it is. But that thing, it's got a skid plate that runs the entire front from the bumper down.
Yeah, so the new Colorado,
it's new
and that's a ZR2 that has the off-road suspension and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
It's really, really cool. He showed up like last Thanksgiving and was like, check out my truck. And I was like, that's not a truck. I said, what are you going to do, Baja?
Yeah, exactly.
That thing's amazing.
That's the thing, though, is like childhood us, the 5-year-old version of all of us. If we can have a drag car and a long travel suspension Baja truck, like, this is the time to be alive, man.
Yeah, it really is.
And you don't even have to go and modify it. You don't have to install any of that stuff. It comes from the factory with dual shock absorbers. And
I remember watching, and you're always going to have like the rock crawlers and stuff, and things like that. But, it used to be that, if you just wanted to get like you just wanted to get a beefed up front end on it for going out in the mountains so that you didn't bang up your bumper every time you rode over something. You had to go to a 4x4 shop. They have all kinds of mods done and stuff.
right.
Pay
Not
some
no more,
bucks.
man. Not no more.
Nope.
You buy a Chevy or a Ford off the off the showroom floor, and it's
Yeah.
going to be a more capable vehicle than what you could build 20 years ago.
I will say
amazing.
what does kind of suck about this though is since their R&D costs are wrapped up in it. Back in the day, you used to be able to go to a Chevy dealership or a Dodge dealership and say, okay, I want the Challenger and I'd like the Hertz shifter, but I don't want the cloth interior. I do want the air conditioning, and you could pick individual things. And now that's not the case. It's
I
like,
wish you could still do that.
no, and you can't at all, right? Like they're like, oh, you want the long travel suspension? Well, you have to have a sunroof. And if you have the sunroof, you have to have the entertainment package. And then, you're kind of forced more into these higher end tiers, and you have to have all those things. You have to have the backup camera, or you have to lose the exterior mirror extenders or whatever it
And
is.
this goes back to what I'm always talking about. Like, we're just not that far off from when this is all going to be a thing in the past. You're going to order your truck a la carte and it'll be delivered by Amazon. It's not far off. This is such an archaic, stupid idea. Every time I go to the dealership now, I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. And I know I go on and on about this on the podcast, but this is again exactly what we're talking about. Why do I, if I want to get a certain option on a Jeep Wrangler or on a Jeep Renegade, the only way you get it is if you buy this package with all these other bells. Why? I'd rather pay the more money to not have all that other crap that I wasn't interested in the first place.
That's what's kind of surprising about this diesel motor with Jeep is they're saying the diesel motor comes in every trim level. And I'm surprised because I figured they'd be like, it's only in the Rubicon. It's only in the Sahara. And back in the day, though, what was really cool is you were talking about if you wanted a truck that you could take off-road, you could go to Chevy and say, yeah, I want the 2500 rear end and front end put in on a 1500 truck.
Right.
Or I need the tow package. And you didn't have to buy the tow package with the backup camera, with the bed liner, with, XYZ. Yeah, that's it. That's the ZR2.
That's my brother's Colorado Chevy ZR2.
And those are
look at that thing, dude. Look at the clearance. Look at the travel. Like that.
Absolutely.
It's an insane. I mean, it looks like something that would have been in the Mickey Thompson off-road series back in the in the 90s, and now this is a street truck.
Right. And back when the S10 was still being built, if you wanted to build that, you would have had to spend $6,000 on suspension, pay a shop to install it. And, it would have been outrageous.
You would have had to do all kinds of modifications because the frame wasn't even designed for that profile.
Exactly.
You couldn't do that. You would have been now you would have been messing with your tie rods and your down arms and everything. Nothing would have worked.
Even worse, now your drive lines changed. So now you have to get slip yoke eliminator, or
and then
you'll need
overheats every 30 seconds because now you've crammed everything. And it's just
and see, this is why I don't modify the Jeep.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
Is that you can't do that now, and you wouldn't want to. You can get a better vehicle off the showroom floor.
Right. And this is why I haven't modified the Jeep yet, and why I talk more about the Chevy, and why
you put in those tight round taillights.
Those things are dope AF. Hashtag round
I just
taillights
like them because
Jeep
I
life.
can pick him out. Whenever I see you in traffic, it's like, oh, yep, those are the round taillights.
All right, so tell me now, am I delusional, or do they just really fit?
No, I like them because they are different. I've always thought that those stupid boxes on the outside of the Jeep look kind of weird.
What's funny to
and
me,
I didn't think about it until you did it,
Right.
and then I was like, I guess it did kind of look stupid that there was just like this black electronic box on the. It looked like a trailer.
Something to rip off on a
see,
tree.
Trailer lights.
you nailed it. And this is the part that frustrated me is I did it, and I'm not going to say who, but somebody said, well, those just look like trailer lights. And I'm like, you realize the Jeep just had trailer lights from the factory.
Yeah, the
Right?
square ones. Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't
No,
know.
I was more amazed watching you put them in. That was
frustrating.
You used one of the most adorable tools I've ever seen in my life.
That was the loudest tool I could have used for
Yeah.
that scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, I do appreciate the help, Brian. Don't take this the wrong way, man.
You are the loudest tool that anybody's ever
Not
heard.
at this show, I'm not.
Touche.
So
Touche.
I will say this is why I haven't modified the Jeep, and you nailed it about this last conversation with this S10, and if we were to do this 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Right.
And the reason why is it's like the Jeep. You put a 35 on, okay, well, now you got to update your axle. Oh, you want to put a bigger axle on. Well, now you got to do your suspension. Oh, your suspension went too high. Now you got to do your drive line. And it's just, you can't modify the Jeep to a certain point without, especially the year I have, without spending 20 grand, 15 grand.
Right.
So there's no point in dropping the first 2,000 unless you got the other 18 sitting behind it. And now you can just go buy a Rubicon with a lift kit, a Moab package, and it's ready to go.
Yep.
And even if you are going to, so I have a guy that does a lot of IT work for me, and he's got a Sexy Rubicon. You've seen it.
Oh, yeah, that
You've
thing's
seen
gorgeous.
Garrett's Rubicon. God, it's gorgeous, dude.
I love that
Well, he's done, he's had stuff done to it. But again, it's all, it's all plug and play. It's
Right.
all stuff that's designed for that ride. No modification needed. Pull this off, put that on.
Warranty.
With a warranty. Right. No questions asked. And he did the same thing with his, he was like for the Charger that he wanted. And he just spent a bunch of time on Car Gurus until the one that matched the trim level and the color scheme and everything else that he wanted popped up. He went and bought it and brought it home. He didn't go out and buy a Charger and then have all this work done.
Right.
He just waited until it showed up on an app on his phone and then went and picked it up.
Right. And
so it's
as car guys, I just can't fault that. Like,
No,
I love
why would
working
you?
on cars. I really do. I love wrenching on them. I love restoring them. I love racing them.
That's
I
because you
like
love breaking them.
I do. And so you have to learn. You got to be rich.
If you're going to be friends with me, you better get used to fixing things.
Right. That's it, man. Like, you
I
got
broke
to
this again. Can you?
you got to be rich or you got to be handy
You
cuz
should see my mic stand.
you've taken all the bolts out so it's lighter weight and
It's lighter weight. It goes faster now. I think it handles better. It corners better now.
I really like the NOS sticker on the side of it. So.
big cob on the back of it.
No, I, like I said, I'm a car guy. I love this stuff, and I love having a unique ride. And there's a reason why I own the cars I own. The 55 to me is the best of the Tri-5s. The TJ to me is the best of the Jeeps outside of the CJs. But I don't fault people for doing what they're doing.
Right.
Not every guy wants to spend because like myself, man, I'll be lucky if I have 15 hours a week to myself.
Yeah, that's it.
And I do spend that wrenching on cars, but I understand why people wouldn't want to. Because
Well,
they're going to have just as much fun as I am, 100%.
We've talked about this. I enjoy being in a car. It's not that I won't work on a car. But it doesn't. I don't have a passion for it. I don't love working on cars, wrenching on cars. Right.
Here's the thing, Mike. I don't enjoy cars more than you do. You know what I mean? If you like going fast and you like driving a nice car, it doesn't matter if I built it or Dodge built it or Chevy built it. We all enjoy the car. Right. And it's no different than Bryan with his Civic. Yeah, he enjoys it in the exact same way that I would. I can't fault these guys.
No.
Go for it, man.
I don't.
And car companies are responding to it.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because they see money in it?
Well, it's like we talked about on the show. That's tailoring to the guy who isn't going to buy the $30,000 version. He's going to buy the $70,000. So they're absolutely seeing it. You're 100% right.
And at every level too. Like you rarely see a car hit the road now that doesn't have the cool version. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you're not going to make the Focus was Ford's past tense was Ford's, kind of daily driver, super versatile, and then it turned into a rally car. It was like, here's the RS. So, that happens with every single version. Now, what's interesting about some of these ones that we're talking about is how they're, it turns into this. It's not just performance, and it's not just, it's the variety of what you can, this and that, and you can have this option, that option. It's like when we went to shop for the Renegade, right? It was like, my wife wasn't real particular about the package. She just wanted something that was on the upper end, but you could get the Limited or you could get the Trailhawk, and then you can pretty much like mix and match the Limited and Trailhawk until you have what you want, right? With all
until you have a Limited Trailhawk.
Until you have a Limited Trailhawk, a Limited Trailhawk base model with a shifter or something. I don't know, but it's like, it's like going back to last week talking about boutique builders. It's almost to the point where it's like, well, who needs them when the actual manufacturers are doing everything to, placate every need and want that the car buyer has.
Man, you see that and you hit the nail on the head. Like you see Barrett-Jackson auctions and old car values have dropped. And the reason why is they're not as desirable to the next generation. Yeah. One, they're expensive. Guys are like, why am I going to, like, especially people who are our age or younger are like, why am I going to drop 120 on that car with a slower 0 to 60? It's uncomfortable.
It's not practical.
Has no AC, no power steering, no brakes. When I can just go buy this thing for 60 and spank the pants off of it.
Yeah. And it's like a piece of artwork, and it's artwork they don't want anymore. You know what I mean?
Well, it's upkeep. It's not just artwork. It's artwork that you almost have to touch up every week yourself.
Yeah.
And so you have this new car that comes with warranty. And it's just the value. That's the thing is the value's changed. You know, a lot of guys used to buy those old cars for the nostalgia, and I'm guilty of it. I love the way the 55 looks. I own one. I know what I'm in for, though, and I'm a dedicated car dude. And I do not blame somebody for going and buying a brand new Camaro. It'll beat my Chevy all day long. It'll be better in every way.
I think the looks will be worth it, though. I always love that.
For me, I have my own personal reasons. That's one of them for sure. I love the uniqueness, but I just don't blame them. Like, and you see it. Old car speed shops and old cars are the ones that are hit hardest by this change in the buyer, and where their value is found.
For sure.
Now, do you think it's a lot of people, like kids being lazy these days?
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't want to work on that car.
100%.
Yeah, like mine.
I will say two things about that. It's not just laziness, you know, because like it's real easy to point to like the three of us in this room work really hard in life for a variety of reasons without going into detail.
To all the people listening, all of us have blue collar jobs. I'm in manufacturing, you're in service, and Bryan is in service as well. Yeah. We are more boots than we are loafers every day.
We ride hard, but the point is that, you know, even for the average person, you know, if you want to pick on the millennials, freaking millennials, well, the reality is that the world has changed, and it isn't as hard as it used to be. It is easier to kind of just like, well, I don't need to do all that stuff. You know, it used to be that you became a car guy because it was like, first of all, you had nothing else to do. Today we have a million other things to hold your interest, right? But if you were a kid that grew up in the 50s, the reason you were so into hot rods is because there was nothing else. There was nothing to do in your town.
Right.
There was go hang out on Saturday night and check out everybody's ride.
And 80 miles an hour was fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Right. And now, you know, you've got a billion distractions. Life is easier, sort of, but we also live a life at a much faster pace because of all the technological advancements and the way it used to be. Like, you know, you didn't have your cell phone on your side. But the way life has gotten now, it's like you literally, like, you are working until you stop working. You're just, you know, you're inundated with these things. Right. So a lot of these younger kids that are just coming out of college or they're in high school or whatever, it's like, it's already, they've got so many things that take their interest that, you know, going home wrenching on a car, what does that do for them? You know, there's too many other options.
Yeah, so, and we can get into this really deep, and we know it. You know, I know how to weld. Bryan knows how to weld. Mike, you have a service job that is, all of our industries are drying up, and we're becoming the last.
And I know a lot of construction stuff, like
that's
hands-on construction, and I can't find guys
that do.
You bring them in here, and it's like, oh yeah, you don't have a clue how to basically run a drill.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Look, that's crazy.
Look at what's happening in the shipping industry. CDL, which is commercial driver's license. It's just they can't hire people fast enough because people don't have them.
Right.
People don't know how to drive big rigs anymore.
Right.
And
they
so
want to learn.
Right, and that skill is changing, and so I agree with you. It's not, and maybe it's laziness, maybe it's just the focus has shifted, but I don't know how big of a problem it is, and that's for a different podcast to really cover, because now we're getting automated driving, and you know, there's all
kinds of political stuff,
right,
you know,
and social, and so we don't want to get into that, but you know,
I'll do a whole nother podcast on that, but that's different.
Yeah, that's whole Mike's thing.
Burn the building
hold on,
down.
Disclaimer: we are not associated with Mike Smith or any podcast.
The opinions of Mike Smith are not. His alone. We only have to have a disclaimer for me.
Right. That's why all the show
just
notes.
Like the rental counter, damn it.
That's why all the show notes say the driving standard featuring Mike Smith.
Featuring this.
His contract is up now.
No, it's. But yeah, I think there's an element of that. Like there's a, you know, a lot of distractions, a lot of ease of life, and a lot of like, and if you don't grow up around it, and also you don't have to, you know what I mean? Like it used to be a situation where if you were a kid and you were 16 years old and you were scrimping and scraping to try to buy some piece of crap car, and you pick it up and you had to work on that car all the time because there was no other option.
You couldn't afford to pay somebody to work on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the world has changed so much, man. You can just be like, I don't want to do that. I'll take it down to the mechanic. And as much as we all like to hammer on mechanics, truth is they've gotten more efficient too. So you can actually just drop it off and go, yeah, can you fix that thing?
Yeah. It has concentrated, right?
Yeah.
And it's like we talked about, like those who are losing interest in cars, and you know, the more they sell more $30,000 entry level eco boxes than they do performance cars, but the guys who are dedicated to it are really dedicated
Yeah.
to it. And it's the same kind of thing. And all of us learned our skills because our parents handed us, our dads handed us a wrench and said, you got to figure it out, kid.
Yeah, fix it.
Yep.
Because you're not rich enough to pay someone to do
Yeah.
it. And I was like, okay, yeah. This
you
is
had
a
no
skill
other
set you
choice.
need. And, and now, and maybe, again, not trying to go down this road. And then a lot of our generation fixed it for our kid.
Yeah. There is some.
And I'm going to stop there. I don't want to get down
I
that.
know, but I won't. You're not wrong. There's a lot of that where I'm like, what do you mean you don't? Oh, crap. I don't know. We'll have to see. You always have to figure that the world is cyclical, right?
So, we kind of talked about the next mod on everyone's list. And, Bryan, I just have to ask, what is the worst mod you have ever done or experienced?
The worst mod?
And maybe not your car. Maybe, this kind of sounds like the radio was probably the worst mod you ended up doing because it kind of caught the car on fire.
Yeah, that one was pretty bad. No, I was going to say, I've done a few things that I'm like, not,
Sure.
I'm just like,
I'm doing some things I'm not proud of.
I don't know why I did that.
At least he's honest.
But I was going to say the worst one that I ever seen was one of my buddies went to this place, got his full body kit put on, his Cavalier, all this stuff, and he brings it back to show me, and they've got wooden deck screws holding it
Wow.
to the car. And I was like, whoa, are you serious, man? Look at this screw. And he's like, yeah, well, what about it? And he had no clue about it, but I'm like, they're wooden deck screws holding this.
They're Torx bit wood deck screws.
Yeah, they were just like, and they were, just right into the back under the trunk holding the ground effects on. I just kind of walked away from it.
Wow.
Kind of laughed at it, like, holy crap. That's one of the worst mods I've seen.
Yeah.
But
What about you, Matt?
I think as far as my personal worst mod I ever did, and in my defense, I was trying my best to keep the 66 Mustang dash from cutting up. I wanted to put a modern CD player in it. So I ran it through the glove box, which in theory was a great idea until I had to put things like your insurance card and...
Those wires. and
Yeah,
crap sticking out.
well, it was clean install. Like, it was good, but that mean like, oh, you want to change the volume? Well, now you got to open the glove box. And so it was nice because the Mustang, if you looked at it from outside, all factory dash, everything looked beautiful.
Oh, wait. You had the stereo in the glove box?
I did put the CD player in the glove box. Now, it was a Clarion, sounded wonderful.
You need a remote.
Well, I had a remote. The problem was back then you had to have the face facing the remote.
Hold on. Let me guess. The problem was reliability.
No, I mean, that was a fair guess. The problem was back then the remote had to see the lens to actually work. Well, then the damn glove box door was in the way anyway, so you might as well just
Bluetooth.
yeah. And so
Wi-Fi.
and you couldn't carry your insurance card on your phone because I didn't have a cell phone every day, and insurance cards didn't fit in the wallet, and it was a full piece of paper. It was like a 3-page stapled document, and so that was just kind of an inconvenience that I had a little toolbox in the trunk that had all my credentials in it that I needed. So, officer, do you mind if I get out of the car while I'm pulled over here? And I just need to show you something in my trunk. And why am I being arrested real quick? That kind of thing. But
Show you something under this
So-
trick switch.
that was me doing my best to keep the value of the car and original parts in place because I had the original old school dial radio
Right.
still there. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Worst mods I've seen, as everybody has, headlight eyelashes on V-dub bugs. Can we stop doing that, please?
Oh, no, that's gorgeous. I mean, they're already driving around in a Beetle.
Yeah, but why do you got to make it look like it has eyelashes?
Right? Because they're... I don't know. I can't.
Of course,
defend
then I
myself.
guess
They're so
guys
stupid.
counted
Guys
with
put
truck
balls on the bottom of their truck.
The truck nuts.
Right? And look. The first time you saw a pair of balls on a truck, you laughed. Everybody did. It was the 10th time you saw a pair
Yeah.
of balls on a truck where you went,
Well, here's the worst part.
Let's
Is then
not stop.
over time they became like outrageous and became like a size thing.
yeah, they were literally like bowl balls dragging.
Right.
yeah, sparking as it's going down the road. Clang, clang.
Hey, dude, I think you left your testes back at that last
Yeah.
light.
Why are they
Jesus.
shaved off on the front? Another terrible mod: low profile mud tires.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty bad one.
That was a thing.
It still is a thing.
It still is a thing.
It's a 22-inch rim on a Silverado 4-wheel drive with a low profile mud tire. It
I
kind of
gotcha.
defeats the purpose
Yeah.
of a mud tire
Yeah.
by like a lot.
Yeah.
I was thinking like
Yeah.
low profile, like what we stick on our Civics and Del Sols.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
That's pretty much it.
That's it, man.
They're like all tread, no,
Yeah.
Like-
all tread, no thread. That's what they are.
I'll have to
Well,
pull.
the point of any kind of off-road tire, mud tire, sand tire, anything like that is that you can vary the air pressure in it in order to get some surface coverage and get it to handle the way you want.
Or
It's
hit a
little tough on a
rock or a
22.
tree stump or anything and keep going.
Yeah.
And when you have a big chrome wheel that bends very easily,
Right.
because it tends to not be high quality rims that they put these things on.
What are you trying to say?
I'm gonna just leave that there.
Yeah.
Let's pull up a photo for Bryan so he can see all these really nice.
I have never seen those.
You never seen that?
Wow. That's interesting.
I don't know if interesting is the word. Yeah, so it's kind of popular with like Jeeps in Florida because Jeeps in Florida aren't really used for Jeeping.
Wow, that is hideously. Ugh.
You know what? Here's what I'll say about that.
Yeah.
That looks like a slot car or something. I can see how somebody finds that cool looking. Ain't me, but I can see it. It's clean. It's kind of derpy, but it's pretty clean. That's hilarious. That's amazing. That's amazing. Have you ever ridden around in a car? And I'm sorry, in like an SUV that's got no tires on it. That's got those little rims with a strip of rubber around them.
The
Oh,
little
yeah.
rubber bands.
Dude, man, might as well be driving in an 18-wheeler without air ride. I mean,
It's probably the closest to a non-pneumatic tire you'll get.
yeah.
You feel everything.
I had a friend that had a Mitsubishi Montero, and she thought, it was cool. It was cool looking, but she had 20s on it with these little rubber bands around them, and that lasted like a year. And then she was like, "Okay,
This is terrible.
This is horrible. This is not a luxury ride."
and
They
that-
looked cool.
Yeah.
And a Montero needed that. Montero is kind of a good looking SUV with that on it. But if it didn't, the big tires are kind of funny on it. I don't know why. It's just the Montero's body shape.
Yeah, it wasn't a very attractive vehicle though.
It could be. Like it looked good with the 20s on it. But as soon as you took the 20s off of it and made it a little more comfortable ride, it looked kind of, I don't know.
It looked like a knockoff Land Cruiser to me.
Yeah. And that really came through once you had the derpy tires on it. It looked funny.
Yeah.
But
Was there a time in your guys' life when you saw, like, do you remember your first modified car that, and not maybe as a kid, just maybe later in life that really you kind of changed? I mean, like if you've ever seen, there's these relatively famous Boyd Coddington, Chip Foose. We kind of talk about them on the show.
Well, I
But
was
you-
around a lot of that stuff as a kid.
Right.
Like I'd see a lot of the stuff that came out of Gary Volling's Rod Shop, up here, and it was it's all cool stuff, man.
Ed Roth was a big car,
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
designer.
What's funny is like a lot of that stuff never hit me. I suppose just because I was around it so much, especially the older styles, 40s, 50s, 60s mods. Well, everything was a mod. Like everything was
Right.
everything
It was a hot
rod,
rod. Right. Yeah. Everything was a hot rod.
Here's my stupid one. This is my guilty pleasure. This is the car I want so badly. Have you ever seen the movie In Time?
No.
It's a relatively mediocre movie with Justin Timberlake. Interesting story. It's about people have
They can buy time.
they can
right?
buy time and they can arm wrestle for time. So basically, you have a timer, and that's your currency for how long you're going to live. Everybody looks like they're in their 20s. I mean, it sounds like utopia to me. But everybody's, they stay that age, and then they just croak when their timer's up, right? Well, anyway, there's these guys called the timekeepers, and those are the cops. The cops that chase everybody down, they're stealing time, right? And they drive these badass Challengers. Dude,
Old or new body?
Old.
Okay.
they,
Oh, you showed me a
Dude.
photo of these.
dude.
They're wide bodies, right?
Yeah,
that's
they
right.
are
I do remember that.
So sexy. That car, like that's the one car that I've ever like seen in a movie or mod or anything where I'm like, if someone would tell me tomorrow, I'll build you that and you can buy it, I'd be all over it. That is one of my favorite looks on a car I've ever seen. Look at
I
that,
remember.
man.
Yeah, I remember you
It
showing me those.
is
They were kind of
sexy.
neat looking.
Yeah, In Time Timekeeper Challenger. Look that up, people. It is a gorgeous car. it looked hyper futuristic and modern,
Right.
but it was a 70s
It was
muscle
a 70s
car,
body,
man.
right?
It was so hot.
Yeah, that's the hard thing about it is like we can never actually, and people who criticize the way the new Challenger and the new Mustang and the new Camaro were brought back, and they're like, well, it kind of looks like the old one. I mean, back then, they didn't care about your safety.
Yeah, you go through the dashboard.
Right, and so now you have to build a car that looks the way it does today because you have A-pillars that actually have to hold up the roof and things like that.
Yeah, you got to hit NTSBs. Well, ask Kevin Hart right now, right?
Oh, jeez. I'm glad he's okay, though.
I
They're
am
going to
too.
say full.
God.
And he did that in a resto mod. That
Yes,
accident was
and
in
he
a
wasn't
resto.
driving.
Well,
Somebody
I'm glad
else
he's
was
okay.
driving.
From last I heard, full recovery, which is
Yes.
good news.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, how about yourself? Do you have any car stories where a modification changed your life, hopefully for the better and not for the worse?
No, it wasn't a modification. It was a pretty cool story, though. It was about 8 or 9, and my grandpa grabbed me and was like, hey, we're going to go downtown. I want to show you something. So I was like, sweet, awesome, let's go. So he took me downtown, and we're walking down the sidewalk, and there's a Lamborghini Diablo sitting
Nice.
there.
On fire, of course, because
So
it's a
I know.
Lamborghini.
And that was the first car that I was just like, I got to see it. I got to stand next to it. Totally awesome. That
Nice.
was like, that's where I fell in love with cars and
Very cool.
doing that kind of stuff. But what was cool was that same Diablo. I don't know if it was the exact same one, but red Diablo. I got to take my kids to it. I'm like, hey, we're
that
going to go
is cool.
somewhere. And it was sitting in the mall, and I got to take them. So I got pictures like at their age when I was like 8, and they were like 8 and maybe 11. But
Oh,
they
that's
all
neat.
got to be
That's cool.
next to the same red Lamborghini Diablo. So I was like, that's
That
totally
is
awesome.
very cool. That's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
But
That's a good story.
yeah,
That's pretty sweet.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Something caused you to be all
Yeah.
jacked
Yeah,
up and
there's-
like things. Did you find one of those Lamborghinis on fire on the side of the road? And
I
that's
did.
When you decided that
So
reliability
my story
sucked?
was for me it was kind of interesting. Like I was probably 14 or 15. I was already part of the car scene. Like we would go to the street races with one of my friend's older brothers.
Yeah.
We'd pack up. He had a 4-door Honda Civic slammed on some Volk wheels, and we'd just go out to the street scene. And
Yeah, as you do.
yeah, he was probably, I think he was only 16, 17 maybe, and we were 14. And one day we went to like one of those places that has like the bumper cars and the go-karts and the mini golf, one of these like little mini theme parks in
A little
town.
carnival. Right?
Yeah, this was in New Orleans at the time. And we're walking to the entry gate for it. And I hear this distinct tuner downshift. There's that Honda muffler and that sound.
Yeah.
And
That tinny.
that just
Yeah.
as it's coming down,
Yeah.
And I turn around and I see, at that time it was still relatively new, or at least modern look. It was a Honda Accord, and it was body kit and aftermarket headlights, and you could tell it was lowered, and but I saw it straight coming towards us.
Right.
I turned around and it was coming from behind, but I could see the straight profile of it, and so I couldn't tell, but I just assumed V6 coupe. With the triangle taillights, that model. And as he got closer, he passed us and pulled into the parking spot in front of us. And it was a 4-door. And he got out and he opened the door, and his wife got out the other side, and they grabbed their kids from the back seat. And it was a fully just decked out, well done, 18s, 5-spokes, really clean. Probably still to this day one of the cleanest cars I've ever seen. And that's when I realized at that time, like, all right, growing up's going to be okay.
Nice.
Like this passion.
Oh, I can be an adult. I can have kids and
Right.
a family.
Like this passion for cars
drive that.
doesn't end, and you
Right.
can always modify. Like this wasn't just a phase in my life, being a 14-year-old and the street scene, like seeing that this was part of, somebody's, not necessarily their soul, but it's really part of that person's personality. And so it was cool. It was kind of reassuring at that age when you're trying to figure stuff out and you don't know how to wrench on things, and you suck at everything.
Yeah.
It was cool just kind of seeing a guy who still had together and driving a cool car.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it wasn't the first modified car by far. I was 14. I'd been around hot rods, and I've been around fast cars before, but that one for some reason still sticks to me today. That you can grow up, but you don't have to grow up.
It's also kind of cool sometimes when you see a mod that's not like over the top. You
Yeah.
see something like that where it's like,
Yeah.
God, it just looks good.
Here's-
And you can't even figure out why it's so good. It's just
Right.
like, God, it's good.
Well, you know that guy, that's not his only car.
No.
That's his daily, you
Yeah.
know, and that's,
Yeah.
I think that might be a part of it.
Maybe that's his hot ride. And what he was riding the rest of the time.
Yeah. He
was,
he goes
beat
to
up
the,
dart.
yeah, it's the grocery getter. It's the fastest way to go get milk and bread in the middle of the night for your kids.
Right,
is
that's
this supercharged V6 Accord. So
Yeah, his day driver's a wrecked F-150.
yeah. I think it's cool though, because that wouldn't have happened if it was just a normal 4-door Accord. It was his mods, it was his personality and that lifestyle, and it affected me. And he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
It's
And we've all been impacted by that. That guy who owned the Countach or the Diablo, he doesn't know that about you. And the guy who designed the car for that movie has no idea that to this day he probably thinks nobody watches that movie anymore.
Right.
But that is
and nobody
impacted.
cared about the car that they designed for
He's probably still like, I can't believe people didn't realize that was a 70 Challenger. With it.
Exactly.
But I think that's the cool part about modifying cars is you don't realize you're changing somebody's life. Probably, I know that's an exaggeration. Let me re-say that. You're changing somebody's thought on cars.
I don't think it's an exaggeration. I look at cars in a lot of ways, especially modifications and that type of stuff, as art.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
exactly
like any
it.
other type of art. If you look at like that, the car that I like so much in time, it's like, yeah, it's just a passing thing to most people. To me, I saw it and was like, that is like that represents everything that a muscle car should be.
Right.
In its perfect state. That's what it would look like.
And
You know what I
timeless,
mean?
because it's
Yes.
the perfect retro versus modern.
Right. And it's supposed to be in a future movie. And
Right.
it fit. It looked right. And yet it was a car that's already 40 years old.
Right.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I think we are losing that a little bit though with these packages. Because there's not the guy who is just going to pick up a factory, or not as many guys who would just pick up a factory car and go and. I mean, that guy with the Accord that I saw changed every part on that car practically.
Right.
And you're not going to see that these days.
No.
And so there's good and bad that comes from this.
You'll see 3 of the same ones around town.
Yeah, you can find a Scat Pack Challenger everywhere now.
Yeah,
A 392 if they didn't get the Demon or the Hellcat,
Right.
or you see Raptors everywhere. Everyone drives one.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
And that's not even the only war we have going on. I mean, car companies, and luckily I think they're embracing it more now, but they were to the point, I mean, even just 4 or 5 years ago, they wanted to make it illegal to modify their cars. They were saying the ECM was proprietary property, and, they were trying to discourage people from taking a car and making it their own.
Again, that's just as stupid as what we talked about last week about, them not wanting to include their cars in video games anymore that had street racing. Was it Toyota?
It was Toyota saying.
That's just as dumb. You're just, you're limiting people's access and interest into your product. That's just stupid.
Yeah,
So-
well, they
but
lost.
I think that's been realized now, as we talked about earlier. Now, they know what you're doing with the computer. So you bring it back, you get reflashed, and you take it in, and you get it worked on.
Well, there's a
So it's
Volkswagen
understandable.
dealership on the East Coast that they'll actually ask you if you want your car tuned by the tuning company, and then the tuning company doesn't give them the full. Like if I was to go buy the tune for my car, just outside, they give them like 3/4 of the tune that they can get. So you do get more horsepower out of it, but it's not the full potential if you did it aftermarket, like
great.
outside of it.
Loot boxes for cars. This is a great idea. Was
Yeah,
this
why not?
partnered with EA?
Why not? Yeah, why not? What's in your package?
Yeah.
Predictions they got wrong. Let's hear it.
Predictions they got wrong, and you heard who was coming on the show for predictions they got wrong. You took a little offense to this.
Yeah, I did take a little offense.
So I'm gonna just throw the name out there. Tony George, who like I said, owns Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You said is Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Yes, Tony George represents everything that auto racing is.
And we did this whole racing episode a couple episodes ago, and we were talking about big budgets and spending caps and all that in motorsports. Well, they interviewed him, and they were talking about that. Tony George says, we feel we have nailed the formula well enough with the big budgets, even unlimited budgets, can't upset the balance of power. And then he goes on to say, We feel the races will be won by the teams that are best prepared and that have the best setups and so on.
Because that's how motorsports has always worked.
Yeah. By best setups, he means most amount of money, and your name is Mercedes.
Any form of racing is always going to be dominated by money. There's no way around it. Every form of racing will always be dominated by money. So it doesn't work. It's a rich man's sport.
Yeah.
It will always be a rich man's sport. There's no way around it. So I was going to bring up last week's, we were talking about my nephew's clutch that wasn't working. And we had suggested that perhaps he was crash boxing it, or perhaps it's an automatic. So it turns out, for all you guys that were concerned, you can stop writing letters and holding your marches and everything. It turned out that it was a bracket that basically holds the clutch pedal in place. And so one half of that bracket
he got
had broken
lucky.
off.
That could have been so much worse.
Oh God, clutch goes out and it's always trouble, and it's trouble that never ends. So it actually turned out to be great. They replaced the bracket, and he's back in business. So
Sweet.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you for your letters and cards and concern.
Yeah. And the
All
balloons
stuff.
and flowers.
The balloons and flowers.
That was the
Especially
big one.
the balloons.
Yeah, let's do bad car advice. Bad car advice comes from Tim in Indiana. You guys ready for the problem?
Sure.
Well, then I should probably pull it up because I have closed that screen.
Back on
The
the
good
sound
car
mixer.
advice is don't email this show because.
Yeah.
All right, this one's a little tricky. New battery, new alternator, new starter. Car still has trouble starting in the mornings.
Okay.
What's our solution? How are we going to help this guy?
Just leave the car running overnight.
Ooh, great idea. In the garage.
Yeah.
Leave it cracked. It'll be
Sealed up
fine.
good. You're going to want to get yourself some sealer. Now, wait a minute. Alternator, battery.
New battery, new alternator, new starter in the car. And these are his words. The car still has trouble starting in the mornings. My advice is stop trying to start it in the mornings. Maybe wait till the afternoon.
You give it some time.
Yeah.
Give it some
Problem
time.
solved.
You know what? I'm going to go with a totally different, a very avant-garde. And this is also super, this is green. This is energy efficient.
Ooh.
This is good for gas mileage. Hire a rickshaw. It's way easier.
Dude, done.
Way easier. You don't need to do any of this shit.
Yeah.
Start a car.
No.
Call your local rickshaw driver.
Have the guy come by with a little bike bell, wakes you up in the morning.
Ding, ding. Yeah, 100%. You can run downstairs.
Jeez. We
Get
should
his
start
little
charging.
rickshaw.
We should start charging. Perfect. Well, there you go. Tim in Indiana or Illinois, because I forgot which.
Iowa. Some I state. You
One of those.
Idahoan
Flyover states that nobody actually lands in or goes to, or
Tim in Chicago. Oh, you've been shot. Sorry. I forgot.
we did say Illinois.
Yeah, oh, we did, yeah.
Hey, that's a good point. Tim's probably dead by now.
That's right. Yeah, especially if he's in Chicago. He's dead as Who cares? This,
Problem
by the time
solved.
this show airs, he's super dead.
Well, we should have got to your email
Condolences.
sooner.
We'll say,
It's been like a whole week.